Good afternoon. Well, as we already heard, HALA index is an index which was described in 1987. The description was based on 33 pectus excavatum patients and 20 controls. They were pediatric patients, and there was a comparison of the HALA index in both groups, in different age groups, and they concluded that the point was 325 to different between pectus excavatum patients and controls. Now, new indexes are coming, and correction index is gaining ground. And correction index was published in 2011. It's based on 252 pectus excavatum cases in 220 controls. It doesn't depend on the width of the thorax, and it measures the percentage of depressed chest, what you need to lift up in the surgery. And they talk that 10% is more or less what a pectus excavatum is like. Another index which came out in 2015 but isn't very used is the depression index. It doesn't take into account any thoracic diameters. It takes the diameter of the vertebral body as a correlate to individual size, and surgery is considered when it's above 0.2. So we find more indexes in literature, like they have been described before, like the also asymmetry index, flatness index, cardiac deformity indexes, etc., etc. So for a person who treats with patients with pectus, there's a big doubt which is the most reliable index, which one shall we work, if they are all equivalent in relation to surgical indications, and if they evaluate the chest in the same way. So since we really don't know, we decided to do a study comparing surgical indication established by the classical HALA index in relation to two of the new indexes, which was correction index and depression index. For that, we did a retrospective study of the CT or MRI done in pectus excavatum patients, which were evaluated in our pediatric outpatient clinic. We measured each index twice, once by a facultative, a pediatric surgeon, and by a trainee. We conducted two studies. First, we wanted to see if there was a good correlation between two measurements to see the inter-writer reliability. And after seeing that this was correct, we took the media of both measurements for the posterior study. The posterior study, we divided the patients in two groups. First group were patients with a HALA index below 325. That would be patients who wouldn't have any surgery. And in those cases, we observed how many of these cases had a correction index above 20%, because we decided that 10% was too low, so we put it on 20%, and the depression index 3.2. On the other hand, we had group 2. In group 2, we had patients with HALA index above 325. This would be patients who would be operated, and there we wanted to see how many percentage of cases had a correction index beneath 20% or depression index beneath 0.2. So, and these were the results. We had 81 studies in 77 patients with a mean age of 12.4, and 74% were male. In relation to inter-rate reliability, we had a very, very good results. HALA index had a very, very good correlation, correction index as well, but depression index was a little bit low. Also, all three were statistically significant. Then in group 1, we had 25 patients with a HALA index beneath 3.25. Of those, we saw that 21% of those, this means 84%, had a correction index above 20%. This is 26% of all the total of the studies. And the depression index, we had that 96% had a depression index above 0.2. So this made us think a lot. And on the other hand, we had group 2, where we had a HALA index above 325. This would be patients which would be operated, and there was little difference, but we had one case where the correction index was below 20%, and 3 cases with a depression index below 0.2. So we draw the conclusions that, first of all, each index we think it's measured considering different dimensions of the thorax. So it seems that they're not completely equivalent. Using the Haller index as the only criteria for surgical corrections may be undertreated in 26% of the cases, or maybe also overtreated in a little percentage of the cases. So what really is important is that we think an international consensus is mandatory to establish which index system was reliable and informative, as well as its optimal limits for surgical indications, so that we all work in the same way. Thank you very much for your attention.